I come every annual meeting of Fire and Rarity. Paul Hodgson offered the clarity. This meeting is remotely and in a video thing. The meeting is streamed on his website and will be available for viewing. Those parts in the meeting wanting to be did use of those in all broadcasts. The is being brought using the channel from Ham Rescue Services. Therefore, the fire test scheduled 30 may be broadcast. This lasts no longer than it. The meeting will be during this less advised. And it is in poor environment, so all those parting from other loads be mindful at all time. Now, judging if wishes to see will invite RTS app function being requested. Decisions will be through. That vote will be by calling name uncertainty, in vote for or abstain. The outcome will be confirmed to sure as a commenders officer announce the next on the agenda. I'd like to remind members to choose the standards will apply. Please keep phones muted and called and unmuted, so note the visible on public answers even when speaking. So get first call out elected president. So we Councillor Cad. Of Fairhurst, Councillor Catley, Price, Councillor Sips, Councillor and Catley. Now move on the agenda and item as usual, General is the chairman. We'll now ask portions of election, please.
Who would like to nominate Councillor as Hampshire Primary, please?
Thank you, seconded. Thank you. Are there nominations? I will just say quick function vote, so I'll ask now that.
Thank you, members. Alvin, if you can just come against or Carter.
For.
Fairhurst.
For.
Councillor Councillor Glenn. Hockley. I think you're muted, Kay.
For that.
I'll come back to count second. Councillor Price. Simpson. Councillor.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Hockley to unmute.
Can you hear me, Kay?
Councillor Hockley.
Okay, what was the
Okay. That's fine. Thanks. That's you as chairman.
Okay, so Arthur is chairman, and I'll have to go through the meeting.
Right. Thank you much, members. It's an trial of first to our meeting, so to Paul start meeting and going through course virtual. Turning to you, the who is vice those that the councillor Ross a nomination.
I will second, Chair.
Very much on the nomination. Do we want to know the voting?
Yes, we can make yes.
There seemed hiccups with, I couldn't hear Jason, but I don't know Jeff had, I think, have another practice.
Thank you, ma'am. Again, I'll call order and if for against Councillor Carr,
For
Councillor Councillor Vasaki.
for
Thank you. Councillor Lee. Hopefully on your tool there should be a symbol with a lit, and if you press unmute. I'll come back, Councillor Hockley. Councillor Min. Councillor Price. Councillor Simpson. And Vaughan.
That was the impression.
Councillor Hockley.
Okay, apologise, but the wrong button.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So again, that's for Councillor Chairman.
right. For that. I'll just make, I think, the more the better we can forward to our next. So, 2, 3, apologies. I think I heard Katie that Stuart is this evening, this afternoon, Katie is apologising for the meeting. This is present. Item for agenda declarations. I will look for the people who may be meeting members to this meeting and pecuniary who may have any matter on the meeting. Interest is not entered in its register. An pecuniary ordinary interest, such matter that we wish to discuss as if it comes up during the meeting, please let us know. 5 is for meeting pages to 10 papers on my brain, holding, but no tag. I lost all my kitchen floor, and I had a piece of string that put aside. So, agenda the minutes being held on the Wednesday, the 5th, such a long time, that was a normal meeting. Page 5, 6, 8, 10. Does anybody comment? Against? Well, I know I was assuming that that record meeting held 19. So, take out this copy that before me. You will, I hope, I've signed. Move on. Items. Deputation. We items. Adjustments. I have things to say. All. Years ago, I don't know whether Jeff's on, but it was in the meeting, but I'm sure if he has been able to in the meeting. But Jeff had a search of as a 13 years recently as CFA and executive. He started director of stroke before becoming director of services. At his time roles, his new strategy in driving successes and the circle has benefits insidership involved with the National's Council work in innovation and national to the service. I think members more with me and authority on paper of fact to take this service to Hampshire. We have contributed needing the past Neil.
Sharon, this is Jeff farewell advice, he says, of the authority. As there's been a force, the company indeed has served for years. His colleagues in the colleagues, the coaches, staying in touch and fantastic. So my thanks is in Hampshire and thanks to him and him well. Leaving is quite difficult, so no conference is very much for his time. We look forward when he to me to shake his head by then.
Thank you, Neil. So, to join.
Chris.
Yes.
It's right.
Oh, Roger.
I guess.
Go ahead.
But put on our thanks to Jeff. He has done over the years. Certainly to recognise he's done with it fire officers, and that was in because I where it was very much working actually looking at national, and that he's done a lot of work and also so I'd like to give proud our thanks he's done our indeed. Thank you.
Thank you for that comments. Well, so what I just want to comments ask you that. Thank you. We move on with my survey update. Fire rescues have an important play in the action to preventing COVID-19 and core activity, loading officer during a strategic group, which is for sure all government agencies gather to pollution communities and use updates. Service employees support here with this activity and activities the ambulance with the water fit protocol and safety to the chief are responsible for running service across the Isle of Wight and the service when necessary, maintain areas and available community. Closely continue to national fire school sensitive projects combine the whole front of sharing in COVID-19 activities continue normal differences. The executive leading locally and nationally ensuring this continue important work ready to enforce it. I'll now invite to further comment you wish to.
Thank you, Chair, members who can hear me. Just brief to those issues of the work of all our staff, the services across Wight. This became, for the rescue service, ready and able, port officers partnering whilst dealing with global pandemic. What that's very early this was on is one bit protected people in our community. Second, to maintain technical service who respired. Try on impact of our own organisation in terms of ability. Did very quick regulatory stress service declared a major incident. We have the control structure would expect it. What that means, we had to a great deal across the organisation normally do. Goes against values as a rescue service. I thank for adapting, working, maintained contact with our community ways, had to reduce our activities, train and stations. But we're in a place where response every focus will start restoration and working with teams by what team goals of our staff to working from home, working what is putting of strategic order. Department and staff way out roles
firefighters frontline. The department goes to work. Our teams making sure equipment that people to maintain work for our staff. Fire control to being because of our teams down the quality of that organisation. Ultimately, rep bodies across the piece of white to memory of a service. Yes, we saw a reduction in the early days. That demand has been increasing as we've seen the glorious weather, but also some of the ease restrictions that we are with. So that's the end of the briefing. Happy to
Thank you. I personal authority would much wish has been happening as you get a mile and attributing certain things to I don't know whether this stage should comment the weather fires see something carry council forest and the fires and just last week was in local area also people were having queues the inherent dangers and we've seen a very good recently and a couple of weeks before then. So I don't know whether you want anything hasty to get a room the public that they've got to take and people.
Chairman, and right, we've seen agents increases as actually predominantly called either the misuse of visible barbecue and there's evident tips being people being rid of and garden. There's been a sharp number of that became out of the conditions. Our crews have been support our colleague order and indoors significant crossing West Sussex. Incidents related to an iron as well. So you're right, our prevents social media and sites Hampshire and the other is significant. All to heed the warning, got a significant risk. I have endured and not turn to that risk continued for future.
Yes, thank you. Well made. It's today that right here, the brand is right. Okay, thank you. Comments. Inspection. Recall MIC election dates had been inspection the Isle of Man. The dates when the Isle of Wight Hampshire would take place. The Artillery Week commenced 30th of the inspection 27th and the big hearing is scheduled to be hosted all action 28th November. Second, the is and we were
certainly one which I think is being sometimes here. When you're there to add any
members. So absolutely new ideas, the HMICF. I've lots more with them in terms of what we individual versus sector over the lots of our pods to share with them. With us, the chief speaking with HR, speaking with liaison, and ending into the VEV groups, to provide
also mention the report on clinical design. Then that on with presentation to the from Peter, the building construction from safety, different history and building safety. There's something more in the future, something more about purposes and coming to last year. They have to has anybody anything they wish to say at this stage, anything that they've attended? most of us are locked down, so we can't go very far. But has anybody seen or attended anything online?
Chris, it's Roger.
Yes, Roger.
Chris, the only thing I would add, I mean, I also attended the fire conference.
Yeah, sorry, Roger, I should have not.
Yeah. And the virtual conference. The only thing I would add to that is that I have some concerns of where the minister wishes to take us. He wasn't very specific in some of the areas, but he sort of drip-fed some thoughts in. And I do have some concerns of, still what his view is about the Police and Crime Commissioner. He did say that his experience was from London, and he made some very swift changes there when he was involved with London. And I agree with you, he's looking for quick changes, but I do have some concerns, and all we can do is wait and see what comes forward. From the planning point of view, is that I think that's good news, is that the government's taken on board the changes that are needed to the planning regulations, and particularly in building regs, and hopefully that will help us. And as I said before, we need to actually revisit our sprinkler system strategy, because it isn't now really what it should be. We're bearing in mind what the government and also the planning people want to do in bringing down the height of buildings to be forced into sprinklers and other things within that area. So I think we do desperately need to look at our policy on that. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Roger. You're correct that the minister was. It was apparent to all of us that he's he made the comment that I won't be around for long. So I think he's wanting to see reform fairly quickly. So we'll have to see what happens. The only other thing that was mentioned, there was a lengthy report that was tabled by Roy Wilshire, chair of the National Fire Chiefs Council, and there was a call for COVID-19 reports to be submitted, and I think that's already happening. It has been happening before this fire commission, but I think they wanted to emphasise at the fire commission they wanted to make it. And then present a consolidated, in fullness of time, present a consolidated report to government, just to demonstrate the commitment that fire has made, and that's to be welcomed. That's no bad thing. Right. Okay. Thank you for that. I think we can move now to item 9 in your pack. You turn to page 11, appointments report. This is going to be introduced by Paul Hodgson. Paul, just to tell you, before you take this report, you'll be aware that we had a pre-meeting discussion of the authority. And we agreed amongst us unanimously that we want to strike from the recommendations 8.7, the member development liaison champion. We prefer not to make a specific appointment because we now conclude that we deal with that as a group, as an authority at APAG meetings, when members with specific function as champions for whatever area can comment and report, and officers are able to comment and debate with us privately in the APAC meetings. So we will remove that recommendation. So with that proviso, I'll hand back to you, Paul, to present item 9.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And noted regarding 8.7, we'll pick that up when we come to the recommendations. This is very much the usual annual appointments report that you'll be used to seeing. There are a couple of minor additions. I'll take you through it fairly briefly because nothing substantial has changed in terms of the political composition of the authority, but you still do need to appoint to the various committees, etc. So section 2 is something that we've added just to draw members' attention to the regulations that came into force in April 2020 that enable us to hold this virtual meeting and other virtual meetings. These regulations currently apply to any meetings held before 7th of May 2021. So we may well hold further virtual meetings under those regulations. So that's something for members to note. Section 3 moves on to the size and political composition of the authority and therefore committees. As I said earlier, the composition of the authority hasn't changed. So the proportionality table as Appendix 1 also hasn't changed. And so what we will need members to do is to agree appointments to the various committees as set out in the recommendations. Section 4 deals with appointments to the pension board, and here we have Councillor Price and Stu Adamson proposed to be appointed for a second 4-year term. And again, that's picked up in the recommendations. There is also a vacancy, I think, for a scheme member representative, and a process is underway to appoint to that, so that will come back at a later date. Section 5 of the report on page 13, that deals with the other appointments in the authority, including APAG, and in line with last year, where the authority agreed to appoint all members of the Hampshire Fire and Rescue Authority to the shadow authority members to APAG. It's proposed that that continues to enable a smooth run through the shadow year. There is the Principal Officer Pay Review Group to appoint to as normal. There is no longer a Member Development Liaison Champion, so we'll ignore that one. Minority Group Spokesperson, and then over the page on page 14, 3S Fire Limited Shareholder Representative, so that's to confirm that the Chairman of the Stakeholder Committee will be appointed as the authority's shareholder representative. And then the final paragraph at F is just to note the appointments of the directors, which have already been made. So that is a very quick whiz through the report. Happy to take any questions on that. And if not, we can then move to recommendations, which will need a little bit of consideration around appointments.
Right. Thank you, Paul. Katie, we've practiced twice, so hopefully the voting will run smoothly on this occasion. I think what I'll do is I'll read out all these recommendations because I think it'll be more appropriate for me to do so. So the recommendations are on page 15. 8.1, that the authority notes the local authorities and police and crime panel coronavirus, another brackets, flexibility of local authorities meetings and police and crime panels meetings. And then yet another bracket, England and Wales regulations 2020 and their effect in enabling the authority to hold virtual meetings as set out in section 2 above. Recommendation 8.2, that for the purposes of Part 1 of the Local Government and Housing Act 1989, the allocation of seats to the Standing Governance and Stakeholder Committee of the Authority be as set out in Appendix 2 of the report. 8.3, that the Authority appoint members of Standards and Governance and the Stakeholder Committee and their respective chairman and vice chairman following the agreed allocation of seats at para 8.2 above until the Combined Fire Authority is formally established in 2021. 8.4, that with regards to the Pension Board, the Authority considered the position as set out in Section 4 of the report and confirm the appointment of Councillor Roger Price and Stuart Adamson in accordance with the Board's terms of reference, with a vacancy to be appointed at a future date. 8.5, that APAG include all appointed shadow authority members as set out in para 5A of the report until the inaugural meeting of the Combined Fire Authority in 2021. That the Authority appoint 3 members and identify one of these as chairman to an informal working group for the review of principal officer pay as detailed in para 5B of the report until the inaugural meeting of the Combined Fire Authority in 2021. 8.7 we struck from the recommendations. So 8.8, that the minor group spokespersons for the Liberal Democrat Party group until the inaugural meeting of the Combined Fire Authority in 2021 is confirmed as set out in para 5D of the report. 8.9, that the chairman of the Stakeholder Committee be appointed as the stakeholder representative for 3S Fire Limited pursuant to Article 39 of the Articles of Association of 3S Fire Limited as set out in para 5E of the report until the inaugural meeting of the Combined Fire Authority in 2021. Right, so I think we can take the
Chris.
block.
Chris.
Yes.
Chris, can I come in? 8.9. You said it. You said it out correctly, because it's written down as shareholder representative in 8.9, and it should be stakeholder, shouldn't it? We decided to get rid of the word shareholder.
No, Councillor Glenn, it's actually the position is shareholder representative, but the position comes from the stakeholder committee. So it's in the company's articles and a company law requirement that a corporate body has a shareholder representative.
I see. So that is not giving us financial responsibilities.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
No.
Thank you.
Chris?
Yes.
Roger. Can I propose within all of those recommendations they be accepted and appointing the same people to all of the positions that were there last year, or in the current, the last year, so that we continue as we are?
Well, I think that's accepted, Roger. Are you content that we take these recommendations on block?
I am.
Katie, are you there? Do you want to?
Hello. Yes. What I think might be good in terms of kind of transparency is if we go through and I complete the recommendations with the members that are proposed to be appointed, I can then share my screen to show you what I have, and then we can do the recommendations as a vote on block if you're happy.
Yes. Yeah. Go ahead, Katie.
Okay, so I think the first appointment is in the first appointments are for recommendation 8.3, which is just to confirm the Standards and Governance Committee and Stakeholder Committee members, along with the chairman and vice chairman. So if we could do the Standards and Governance Committee first.
So we haven't got the names of the Standards and Governance Committee scheduled here, have we? Have we? No.
So if we are looking at the members appointed at the moment, I believe the current chairman is Councillor Fairhurst and the vice chairman is Councillor Mintoff.
Yes.
So it's just to confirm the three other members that are currently on the committee.
I think it's Councillor Price, Councillor Vaughan, and Councillor Glenn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
880 achievement changes slightly and is consistent to what it in the past. Important that as we get through the safety planning at performance response times, we unless complex through paragraph and B onwards upon serve the challenges of patients, so very early analysis identify where special and traditional pumping appliance goes first and the impact that has on response times because pumps are quicker. There's also a clear linkage with on-call availability as well. And again, when we do our COVID specific performance reporting, it's going to be very interesting looking at that period lockdown availability at high, how that's on response as well. And all of them through year of the sun. Point I'd like to mention too is the casualties in paragraph 4, and in that being a national 6% and reflect on action in teen was a point of curiosity inspecting for why and seeking it, so an increasing awareness of that issue. We anticipate, as I'm sure you will all be aware through your own organisations, is that there will be a fourth wave associated with COVID with regards to mental health. So the impact of the lockdown and the impact on individuals through changed life and working circumstances, we anticipate there will be some change to that reporting within the future. And that so brings me, before I take any questions, just to kind of draw together some threads within the performance report. There has been tremendously good work across the piece within the organisation, response times, reduction in incidents, non-fatal casualties, our increase in safe and wells, and particularly opportunity through COVID to, whilst we have been unable to conduct safe and wells other than the most at-risk individuals, we've taken the opportunity to explore, as we are with this technology as to how we're meeting now, the opportunity for telephone safe and wells and our on-call availability. So there is obviously areas where we need to learn and improve, but overall you can see that the picture of performance is ever richer. And as I've mentioned a couple of times, in terms of from reporting to the Fire Authority, we look forward to, in the coming months, presenting you with a deeper analysis of the impact and opportunities that have arisen through and because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think I'll pause there, and really happy to take any comments or questions, or indeed for my colleagues.
Thank you. You indeed, Shanta. It's heartening to note that in spite of all the strengths that your teams are faced with at the moment, work still continues. I think I've got David Simpson asking a question.
Yes, thanks, Chris. Shantha, on page 26, paragraph 19. Yeah. Fitness levels.
Yes.
It seems to be an enormous number of people. My question is does it apply to these figures all firefighters? Is it just whole-time firefighters? Just on-call firefighters?
So I'll happily take that question, but it may be that Molly can add more detail, but it is all operational staff that need to maintain and be safe to have a degree of fitness.
So because what worried me is we've got 242 who were referred and another 108 retaking their assessment. It's rather worrying to see such large numbers. 2% increase doesn't sound very much, but we've gone from 16% to 18% of the workforce.
So just to add to the points, we may need someone to go on mute. I'm not sure what is feedback on the line. But the point that Shantha raised is absolutely right. We insist on fitness standards to protect our firefighters from each other. If they become unfit, unwell in hot wears, it's really, really important to make sure that they are fit and able to do their roles. And we can expect, because we set the standard in a way we do, we can expect some firefighters to need more work than others. So the variances do change over the period of time. But you're absolutely right. What tends to happen is if they don't pass first time, they are not, and depending on their level of achievement, they don't always come off the run immediately. They're worked with to make sure that their fitness is improving. So in terms of availability, the impact on the service, it tends to be quite minimal. But we do insist on that standard is achieved in a reasonable time, and therefore not letting firefighters' fitness levels degrade too much should they be off for a long period of time, going well, or whatever it may be. So you are right in pointing to the numbers can be worrying, but we are still one of the few services that has compulsory fitness tests across the piece, across the Isle right now, and we are absolutely adamant that that's a way of managing the safety of our teams, and we will drive this continually to make sure that's understood, and it's supported by the unions too. Molly, is there anything to add from your perspective?
Yes, thank you. Just to reassure members, in addition to the comments that Neil has already made, within Hampshire Fire and Rescue Service and the Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service, we actually undertake fitness tests twice yearly for our firefighters. So they have to undertake one every 6 months, which is far in advance of the expectations, which is that they undertake one per year. So we're assessing them every 6 months in order to ensure that they maintain fitness for their role. So we're doing all that we can to ensure that our staff are fit and healthy to undertake the roles that they undertake.
Chris, may I ask Shantha a question?
Yes, yes, go ahead, Jonathan.
Thank you. Following on from Councillor Simpson's comments on 19, if what happens to firefighters who fail the reassessment? That's my question.
So as kind of sort of has been touched on by Molly, obviously because of the importance of having people on the run who are safe, we have to make sure that obviously safety continues, and we work with them in a very supportive way to get them on the run as soon as we possibly can, because what we can't do obviously is carry that risk, but to them. The other thing I think that's worth drawing out is in this first year of our safety plan, we are undertaking work, so it does relate to fitness, to understand the impact of menopause, of aging, etc. on our firefighters, and there will no doubt be a fitness angle to that. So with respect to how we measure people's fitness, how we ensure that we are assured they're safe from a fitness perspective, we're continually monitoring that to make sure that the tests that we are conducting are right and appropriate.
Okay, Luke, thank you very much.
Right, thank you, Shantha. Any questions?
Yeah, can I ask one on paragraph 20?
Sorry, don't all speak at once. There was somebody before you, David.
I think it's Roger. Roger's mic's on.
Roger, were you asking a question?
Yeah. I wanted to ask one quick question of Shantha. The report then follows with the actual annual report, which gives much more detail of what is in the report. My question is on page 53 of the report, to do with arson. And wait till everybody's got there. Okay. Right. if we look at the chart at the top, years 2016, 17, 18, I'm looking at particularly because I think 19 is what will happen from that will come through later on, because it takes time to get through through to convictions and what have you. And certainly this year's is nothing will have happened in that area yet. But is there anything that can be learned from the situation of that we have a number in those 16, 17 and 18, 90, 58, 91 arson being proven. A number were arrested, but in most cases it was at least half were only charged, and then even less than charged were convicted. Is there any lessons that we can learn?
He's dropped out.
I think in terms of that question, it's as much as what can we learn from that drop-off, I'm actually going to ask Stu, because he's closer to the detail, to respond to that question.
Thanks, Jennifer. Hopefully Roger can hear this. So the team itself are consistent of fire officers as well as police officers, which I'm sure everyone is aware of. And the information gets collected by our fire investigators and processed by the team, which is a joint team for that intelligence purpose. So we have little control, I guess, on the judicial system, which is then controlled purely within the Hampshire Constabulary, as you would expect around crime. What I would say, and to give you some reflection of colleagues around the country, is that the conviction and the charged rates and conviction rates are significantly higher in Hampshire and have been for a number of years, almost a decade now, where we've seen the success of that team working together. I don't think that most of the issues come around the lack of evidence and lack of skill. It's much more to do with the nuances around the judicial system. Hopefully that helps to answer the question.
Right.
I think Roger's offline.
Yes. It appears Roger's offline. Thank you for that, Stu. David, are you still there? Are you?
I'm still here listening in. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, you ask your question now then.
Well, if I can go on to the last one that Stu's just answered, I think we ought to be putting out press releases. Commit arson in Hampshire, you will be prosecuted. You've got a better chance of being prosecuted than anywhere else in the country. In other words, try and deter people even more, because they're going to find out that they're going to get that prosecution. But I wanted to say on paragraph 20, which is page 26, first of all, it's great that we now have 86 female firefighters. That the BAME has increased as well. But I wanted to link this to my earlier question, and it may possibly have been answered. Are we finding, I think my bias is that the female firefighters are going to be fitter than the male. Is that actually going to be true? Are they passing their fitness tests more than the male ones are?
I'm not sure there's any evidence to that. Molly, do you want to come in there?
Hi, yes. No, I'm not sure that there's any evidence of that either. It's certainly something we could look to explore. What we have done after our last whole-time recruitment campaign was that we undertook an evaluation of that piece of work to understand whether any of the requirements of that process, so such as the physical testing, had a discriminatory impact in terms of females or race or any of the other sort of protected characteristics. And that evaluation found that it didn't. So the performance across the board was high for all of our applicants, regardless of their gender. So I think what we can't assume is that there is issues to do with gender that are directly causing fitness failures. What I think, as Shantha has pointed out earlier, is that we are seeing that having an ageing workforce and females ageing and reaching the age of the menopause may have an impact on their fitness, and that's something that we hope to explore and understand better this next year.
Thank you.
Right, thank you, Molly.
Chris, it's Roger. I'm back in. I lost my internet. Yeah, I lost my internet connection. It went down completely, but I'm now back. So I don't know what Shantha said about the arson issue. So I'll catch up with her at some later stage.
Well, actually, the question was answered by Stu,
Right.
and he was.
I'll catch up with Stu later on then.
He was pointing out to us that statistics in Hampshire are far better than elsewhere in the country. Right. Any other in relation to arson? Any other questions, members, on agenda item 10? It is 10, isn't it? Yes, 10. Right. Can you turn to page 29? You have a recommendation that Hampshire Fire and Rescue Authority notes the performance for 2019-20 detailed in this report. Katie, are we going to, do we have to go to every member to note this, or can we take it? Are you there, Katie?
Hello, yes. As this report is just to note, then we could just ask members to declare whether they are against the recommendations.
Well, I'm happy to ask anybody who is not content with the recommendation to say so, and in the absence of any such comment, we'll accept that it's unanimous support for the recommendation. Are you content with that arrangement, members?
Yeah.
I take it you all are. Good. Thank you. Thank you. Turn now, please, to page 75, and it's still with you, Shantha. Service Plan 2015-20, Performance Review and Close Report.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So again, it's wonderful to be able to bring this piece of work to you. You will have seen over the last 5 years on a routine basis reports from myself or other colleagues giving you an overview of how the service has performed against the strategic plan, against the service plan, the 5-year plan. As we draw a line under this and we look forward now onto the joint safety plan for 2020 to 25, it gives us the opportunity to look at not just where we are with each of the deliverables, the most recent deliverables within the service plan, but also to acknowledge the original goals of the service plan and where we are against them, which is why you have the 2 different appendices. So again, a lot of detail. I'm really happy to take any questions or comments. I think this is such an important document because obviously it shows how the service has delivered against the Fire and Rescue Authority's policies, and in some ways it is a celebration of that completion of that 5-year work. Of course, the other thing to mention is that whilst it is 5 years, it reflects on 5 years of the plan. That's not everything the service has been doing, because you will recall that the service plan was very much focused on change and improvement rather than perhaps business as usual. So then I think I'll draw your attention just to the two appendices, just to be clear. So Appendix A is the outcome versus, if you like, the positions set out in 2015, and Appendix B, it gives you the detail of the final set of deliverables. So really happy again for myself or colleagues to take any questions or comments on this agenda item.
Right. So, questions, members? No. Well, thank you for that, Shanta. Whilst you point out this is a closure, I'm sure we will come back to this final report as we go into an inspection regime, which would probably be the early part of next year. So thank you again, Shanta. Members, page 78, recommendation that closure of 2015-20 service plan is approved by the authority. Are you happy with a similar arrangement to the previous report? Anybody who isn't content to accept that recommendation, please indicate. In the absence of any such recommendation, I think we can ask Katie to record a unanimous vote of approval. Nobody said anything, Katie, so you can record that we've all accepted that recommendation. Right, okay, moving on. Agenda item 12, the organisational risk register. Steve Apter has been quietly waiting somewhere to present this report.
Thank you, Chairman and members. Members, just by way of introduction of the paper and the organisational risk register, you will recall pre-COVID days back in September, you agreed to a new revised approach to risk management and tidying and tightening the governance across the organisation and taking risk management as a business tool to inform and help continuous improvement of the organisation. The risk policy position was agreed back in September from an authority perspective, and that drives and has driven the safety plan approach, which you'll recall takes an external and an internal risk perspective. And then the organisational risk register is really our way of ensuring that we deliver or mitigate those risks that have the potential to prevent us from delivering and against our priorities in the safety plan. It also, in the paper, formally closes the previous risk register, which was far more a static approach. So this is about tightening governance and assurance around our approach to risk management. Two things that follow with this. One is the policy position that we referred to, and then there are the directorate risk registers. So the detail below that we as an exec group on your behalf ensure are managed, and then the governance of that sits with the exec group chaired by obviously Neil. So that's by way of introduction. It's taken us forward and really delivering what the safety plan is all about, which is around tidying up our risk management approach. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you, Steve. Sharon, I have you wishing to speak. Sharon Mintoff.
Thank you, Chairman. If we go to page 115, option 1, annual monitoring to be undertaken by the Standards and Governance Committee. I'm assuming that will fit in with our current pattern of Standards and Governance meetings. Thank you.
Yes, that was the proposal, because on behalf of the Constitution says the Fire Authority, but the Standards of Governance is a function of the Fire Authority. So the decision was, and the discussion at the time was, Standards and Governance. That may be seen to increase the frequency, and I know Shantha will work with Councillor Fairhurst in terms of visibility around the risk register going forward. I think the principle is that it's a live tool. We'll be constantly monitoring and tweaking and managing the using the risk register to help us. It isn't a static thing, which is why it needs to be monitored and owned at authority level.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. No more questions. Right, I can take you please to page 117 and the recommendations, which I will read out. And your question, Sharon, was relevant because option 1 is the recommended. It is recommended. So I'll read out the recommendations. That Hampshire Fire and Rescue Authority, number 24, agrees option 1 to close down the current strategic risk register and to adopt the organisational risk register as part of the agreed risk management policy safety plan and delegating its management to the Chief Fire Officer. Number 25 agrees to delegate oversight and annual monitoring to the organisational of the, I beg your pardon, monitoring of the organisational risk register to the Standards and Governance Committee. Number 26, delegate to the clerk to make the necessary consequential minor amendments to the Constitution to reflect the changes agreed at Paras 24 and 25. Okay, so I'm back to you, Katie, again to deal with those recommendations.
Thank you.
Can we perhaps ask members to indicate whether they have whether they are content with all 3 recommendations, and we can then take them on block. So if anybody wishes to say anything about any one recommendation, they should do so now.
Agreed.
Nobody's saying anything, so that's okay.
Chris, sorry, I was trying to get in there just for a second.
Yeah.
Assuming that these are agreed, as the risk champion, will I be dealing with the Chief Fire Officer from now on, or Steve Apter?
Definitely Steve Apter, Councillor.
Still be me, Councillor Glenn, I'm afraid.
No, it's all right. I'm okay with that. Right, thank you very much, Chris.
Right, okay. Right, Katie, back to you.
Thank you. I'll go through in alphabetical order. Councillor Carter?
4.
Councillor Chad?
4.
Councillor Fairhurst?
4.
Councillor Vasakali?
Sorry, I missed that. 4.
Thank you. Councillor Glenn?
4.
Councillor Hockley?
4.
Councillor Mintoff?
4.
Councillor Price?
4.
Councillor Simpson?
4.
And Councillor Vaughan?
4.
Thank you. Those recommendations are carried. Unanimous.
Thank you, Katie. Right. You should turn, please, to page 143 in your agenda pack. Agenda item 13, annual statement of equality. And I invite Molly to present this report, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, everybody. I have the pleasure of providing you with the annual equality statement this afternoon. So this report and its appendix outlines the service's progress towards improving our equality performance, which is a duty that we have under the Equality Act. The report asks the Fire Authority to note our improving performance, particularly in respect of recruiting women into operational roles, as we've already had noted today. Our on-call recruitment campaign has been particularly effective, at improving our numbers of female firefighters, particularly in the on-call, and we now have 8% of the workforce, of the on-call workforce being made up of females, which is really positive progress. Our numbers of BAME employees have also increased, but we are absolutely committed to further improving our performance in this area. And to do this, we have built and continue to build really strong networks with our communities. We're using our internal network groups to understand what might be causing barriers to prevent entry into our organisation. And we have also undertaken a BAME-focused Have a Go recruitment day, which I believe the chairman attended. That was earlier this year, and it was held in the St Mary's community. And 80% of those who attended that day identified themselves as BAME. So we are hoping that all of those sorts of positive activities will lead to a higher number of applications from those communities. As I mentioned earlier, we're just about to commence planning for our next whole-time recruitment campaign with the intention of running a trainees course early in the new year. Clearly, COVID-19 is going to have an impact on the recruitment campaign. We carried out a number of Have a Go days at the start of this year, but we are unlikely to be able to hold any more whilst social distancing is still in place. However, we know that we have had huge success with social media in the past, and we will continue to use that in order to increase the number of applicants and really target those parts of the community that we aren't currently represented as high as we would like in our organisation. I think that's probably the highlights from the report, but if there's any questions, happy to take some.
Thank you, Molly. Yes, I did attend the event at Mary's, which actually was held in a school quite close to the fire station, and it was a very good event. I was very pleased to be able to attend. Circumstances are difficult now, but I would hope that the people who came down from Leicester, when it's possible, they can come back again, because I was incredibly impressed with their dedication. It was excellent. And by the same token, I was in here at Eastleigh, I think last week, and just by chance I met Lou Taylor, who I've met for the last couple of years at St Mary's for Black History Month. I'm not quite sure what Lou was here for the
police board.
Oh, he's on the police board. He was here for a police meeting. So do you have any contact with Lou, Molly? Because I did say to him that in due course it would be expedient to meet with him to see whether he's got any ideas or any suggestions how we can improve our BAME numbers. So, have you seen Lou?
Thank you. No, I haven't had any direct contact with Lou recently. I do know that he is obviously very much involved in the Black History Month, and as are our inclusion and diversity team. So, and I know that planning is underway for that, but clearly if social distancing remains in place for us, then that will unfortunately be quite a different event this year, but we're connected to that. And also would be very welcome to explore how perhaps we could use Lou's knowledge to enhance the work of our internal network groups in better understanding some of the barriers that we are finding in terms of reaching out to and increasing applications from those diverse parts of the community. So certainly we can make contact and get in touch. Thank you for the recommendation.
Thank you, Molly. I'd like to think that we could, in due course, when it's possible, make some contact with Lou, because he has, in my opinion, he has what I would term an element of charisma about him. He's worth making contact with. David Simpson, you wanted to ask a question. You there, David?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you very much, Chris. Really, it's a couple of things. One is I'd like to thank Molly, Stu and the team for the increase in female firefighters on call, and indeed the retention that the work in the last year has made to on call. I believe they come under Grey Book, and Green Book is back office staff, which I make 306 people. Just adding the two figures together. Do we only look at gender, or should we also be looking at disability? I appreciate with Grey Book that's not likely, but Green Book I would have thought it was one of those things we should be looking at.
Thank you. We're currently doing lots of work around our equality data, so we recognise that we would like to be able to report more to you in terms of both disability, gender orientation and sexual orientation. So those are things that remain areas that we want to be able to improve our sort of equality performance by improving the information that we can provide to you. So we do have some information around disability, but it is somewhat limited. And what we certainly don't have is it broken down in a way that's tells a meaningful story at this time, but we're going to continue to champion it, and we've already been sending out some communications to our teams, encouraging individuals to provide more information about themselves and how it can help us improve our performance as an organisation to better understand the current diversity within our own workforce.
Oh, just to add to Molly's answer, Councillor Simpson, the point you make about doubting very much whether Grey Book employees would have disabilities, that's not quite correct actually, and it's worth us all reflecting on disabilities often can be hidden and or declared or otherwise. So we are encouraging all of our teams to think about the disabilities that they have and whether they're willing to share them with us, because we can make reasonable adjustments for them. And I think it's true to say across the country there are active firefighters with clear disabilities that reasonable adjustments have been made, whether that be hearing, whether it be eyesight, whether it be more hidden disabilities which aren't physical. We definitely have those individuals in our organisation, and we are keen to make sure we recognise any reasonable adjustments we should be making to make their lives easier and allow them to thrive also. So it's really, really important that we consider disabilities more than the ones we can see as well. But I think your question is a really good one, and we are determined to continue to get better at this data and indeed to support our teams.
Thank you.
Right, thank you for that.
Chris.
Yes, Roger.
Chris, it's Roger. I've got one question from Molly, and that is on page 150. We have the age profile of the different age brackets. Is it possible to break that down for firefighters and other? Because obviously it's very important from the firefighters to have a range of ages from the younger to the older, and then we can also see if we're approaching a large number of staff at the upper age limit, that we're going to have to do a lot of recruitment. It gives us a feel for what's likely to be happening.
Yes, we certainly can do, and if that's a requirement that we include that additional data before we publish this, then we can work with the team in order to ensure that the age group is broken down into contract types as well.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Molly. I'm sure that additional information is probably fairly readily available. Okay, anybody got any other comment or question? Right, so turning to page 147, the recommendation is option A, that the annual statement of equality workforce demographics be noted by Hampshire Fire and Rescue Authority. So, you all content with that recommendation?
Yep.
Yes. Nobody's saying. So everybody. So Katie, do you want to?
Fine.
Can we just note? You there, Katie?
Yes, thank you. Yes, yeah, as that one's for noting, then we can yeah, assume that members are happy unless they state otherwise.
Right. Okay, that's good. So moving on swiftly, again with you, Molly, HFRS pay policy statements, page 151.
Thank you. So this report and the attached pay policy statement at Appendix A ensures that we provide transparency in respect of the Fire Authority's policies for remuneration. It's an annual requirement to publish this information under the Localism Act 2011. And the report requests that the authority approve the pay policy statement for publication on Hampshire Fire and Rescue Services website. The information that must be published includes the remuneration of the service's chief officers. And for our purposes, we have included all of those within exec group who are employees of Hampshire Fire and Rescue Authority. So that excludes myself and Rob Carr, as we're employees through shared services, but includes all of the other directors. The statement must also provide information about the relationship between the chief officer's pay and the average pay of our workforce. And these multiples have been fairly consistent for some time at approximately a ratio of 5.6 for Green Book and 4.7 for Grey Book. And this is largely as a result of our pay increases for all of our workforce, including principal officers, being broadly similar over the last few years. The statement which is approved today, which is put forward for approval today, is correct as we stand today. However, should there be subsequent pay awards this year for any members of our staff, then that will affect this financial information and the multiples, and so at that point would need to be updated. But for the purposes of today, it's correct based on the salaries of all of our staff. Happy to take any questions.
Members, any question, any comment?
Can I say, I think we should blow our own trumpet that nobody is on the minimum wage, and indeed nobody is on the national living wage, but everybody is above that. I think that's a great achievement for the service.
Right. I think we probably all agree with that. Good, thank you. So page 154, members, then you've got the recommendation there that Hampshire Fire and Rescue Authority approve the pay policy statement at Appendix A for publication on Hampshire Fire and Rescue Services website. And you've got Appendix A on page 158. Are you all content with that recommendation?
Fine.
Agreed.
They are. So, Katie,
Agreed.
you can take it that we've noted that recommendation. You there, Katie?
Thank you. Yes, sorry. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Good. Thank you very much. So we move on to page 159, agenda item 15. Matt has been waiting patiently. This is the sponsorship and charity engagement policy position.
Thank you, Chairman. Hopefully you can all see and hear me. This paper basically seeks an approval to establish a policy position on behalf of the authority for how the service handles sponsorship and charity engagement. So those activities bring a huge amount of benefit to our communities and to the organisation as a whole. And good examples of that are the work that members will be familiar with through the Firefighters Charity as an example. However, what we don't have as part of our new policy, procedure and guidance framework is a clear position on how we handle and how we engage with these organisations. So in paragraph 9, there's an outline of why we think we need such a position. So really it's around safeguarding the reputation of the authority and obviously the service, and ensuring that we adopt a consistent and a fair and professional approach on how we source and oversee any sponsorship or charity engagement that we do decide to do. So in order to do that, we're planning on the policy position aligning to paragraph 14 in this report, which has a number of key principles, if you like, that any organisation that we would engage with would have similar values, a similar ethos in terms of the approach. A piece around picking up the conversation we've just had around our equality data, that the sponsor or charity would have an inclusion and equality policy of their own, and if not, they would certainly adopt our own expectations of that. So in terms of putting centre our desire to be an inclusive employer of choice. And the rest of that is obviously outlined within the report. So there's the other key piece is towards the end of the report, it's paragraph 21, which just covers some of the legal basis of this approach. So obviously you can see there from the Fire and Rescue Services Act that we are able to look for support on non-legislative activity. But clearly, and the important piece here to remember is that this shouldn't be done in a commercial setting. So that would take us out of the boundaries of the Act if we started to seek sponsorship, for example, as on a commercial basis. If you go to the appendix, and the recommendation that's at the end of this report is for you to approve the policy that is attached, which covers the points I've just raised. If members have any questions, obviously happy to take them.
Thank you, Matt. Members, we previously had some discussion about this at APAG, so I think you were familiar with the fact that we would receive this report. Any questions?
Chris?
Roger, yes?
Chris, will any sponsorship come back to the members to approve before it actually takes place, or will it be just approved by officers?
So the intention there, Councillor Price, is that it would be approved by officers as long as the approval was in line with the policy at the appendix, which obviously the authority will today considering.
Yes.
I have some slight concerns, is that if we're looking at large amounts of money concerning sponsorship, there may be, spending, that there should be a limit of what officers can approve up to, and then if it's large amounts, that it should come back to members. It's just a thought.
What are your thoughts on that?
So bear in mind at the moment, in fact, when we did a scour of the other fire rescue authorities, you don't find controls like this anywhere else. And I think it's us recognising that. So to give an example, Hampshire Fire and Rescue Authority and the service and the Isle of Wight are big supporters of the Firefighters Charity. And there are things like car washes to support the Firefighters Charity, because it's an integral part of helping our firefighters recover from injury and indeed their families, extended families. So there's a great example of a partnership essentially that we are into and have been for many, many years, that there's no process of authorising that, and there's no mechanism for agreeing that. So I and the team are a bit concerned that we need to kind of regularise this. So what makes sense, I think, and I think it's a fair question, Councillor Price. So because there will be in this policy describes a register of sponsors, if you like, sponsorship, both ways. Either we are sponsoring and supporting an organisation, or indeed they are supporting and sponsoring us. Then there's a great example of how those two things operate, and maybe that we use the register to come back to you with to look at and then consider further in the future. The policy would be a great steer for us in the first instance, and when we share with you the organisations that fit within that register, it may be worth us a further conversation about where we need more controls in place to satisfy the authority that we're acting appropriately and in line with not only legislation but your wishes also.
The other thing just to add before you, Councillor Price, is on page 162, paragraph 19. There is the statement there that obviously any sort of approvals would need to be in line with what the authority has already delegated to officers in terms of contract standing orders. So that sort of gives you some, and as the Chief Officer was saying, anything beyond that would obviously be captured within this report anyway.
So, thank you. Having heard what's just been said, I'm happy for it to go ahead as being sort of indicated by Neil.
Yes, David Simpson.
Yeah, thanks. I would like, if possible, could you just advise us of anybody you're actually going to be taking on? I've no problem with you making the decisions. However, I think the councillors in particular are probably going to be more politically aware of any traps that you may not be. Being a cynic, I can see some people coming in and they look very nice and you do the checks, and then one of us will say, are you aware that such and such is so and so and the different connections? And if you just float it out to us before you make the decision, then at least we've got the opportunity to comment.
Matt, perhaps this is something that you can speak about at APAG in the course of time.
Yeah, absolutely. A good question. I think it's around how we use APAG to keep you updated of how things develop. And as Chief Officer said, if we need to bring the sort of the records of things and they're periodically back to the authority, obviously we can do so.
Good. Right, members. There being no more questions, I'll take you to page 165. The recommendation that the policy statement at Appendix A, which you've got on 167, be approved by Hampshire Fire and Rescue Authority. So in the absence of any dissent, Katie, I think we can say that everybody notes that recommendation.
Okay, yes, if members are happy.
Agreed. Agreed.
Right. Moving on swiftly now to agenda item 16, which is the minutes of Standards and Governance Committee held on the Monday, the 2nd of March. When was life still normal then? I think it was. The Chairman of Standards and Governance. Do you wish to present your minutes?
Life was normal then. We did actually meet in person to have this meeting. I think the minutes are fairly self-explanatory, but happy to take questions.
Right. There are no everything resolved at that meeting. Yes. So we'll note those minutes then.
Thank you.
Just record that, please, Katie, that we've
Agreed.
approved.
Yes.
Agreed.